After a disastrous run in VCT Americas Stage 1, NRG have decided to make some changes. FNS has now officially retired from Pro Valid. They are bringing in a Tier 2 prospect in Scuba, as well as bringing back the coach that they got rid of early in the year, Bonkar. So with this recent news of changes coming to this team, honestly changes that have been pretty desperately needed for a while now, I thought it'd be good to look back at Stage 1 for this team and talk about where things went wrong. This is a team that came into the year with seemingly a pretty stacked roster. They had some very high expectations after winning some off-season tournaments, but those expectations were very quickly not met. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So this is the board we have today. We have their record in Stage 1, we have some stats to talk about, and first we're going to start at the top left and talk about their record during Stage 1. They barely made their way into playoffs with a 2-3 record, only making it to playoffs because of that win over Leviathan. A team that was also having a lot of their own struggles. They looked like they were probably the favorites for that matchup, but NRG were able to play a good enough game to be able to 2-0 them. But every other match aside from that one, things just were not going well for NRG, even in their second win. They started their stage against C9, a team that does always have a very strong performance during these group stages, and C9 were able to beat them. NRG did get a map off of them, winning the first map 13-6, that one was Lotus, and looked like they could have won that one. However, C9 were able to make that comeback and put NRG in the ground. Then they had their second game of the split against Furia, a team that was having a lot of struggles, and that was a match that they were able to win. However, they did lose a map to Furia, and that definitely is not nothing, because Furia are a team that just looked terrible during Stage 1. They had a really bad kickoff, they had an even worse Stage 1. They're a team that is making some sweeping changes as well. However, to NRG's credit, after that map 1 loss, they were able to recover and have two very dominant maps in maps 2 and 3. However, that would be the last time in the stage that we truly saw NRG dominate another team, because their very next game was against G2, a team that has been, for the entirety of the year, the best team in the region. And no one expected NRG to win that one, but there was at least hope that they could make it close, but instead they lose the first map 13-1 and then the second map 13-6. So only winning 7 rounds total in that matchup, but they just ended up having a terrible performance. Yes, G2 are very good, but NRG weren't looking good either. At this point in the stage, it really was looking like the only bright spot on NRG was going to be the performance of Som. Som, a player that did have some really good performances in those first 3 matches. However, things would kind of start to fall off for Som and the rest of the team after that. After that match against G2, they played MIBR. Again, another match they are not favored in. MIBR were playing very good at the time, and still are. They're known as one of the best teams in the region. They're going to Toronto, and NRG had just gone dominated by G2. You would hope that after getting beat down that hard, that NRG would be able to come out swinging against MIBR. Instead, that is not what happened, and one of the roster changes that they did earlier in the year came back to bite them. Verno was a player that was on this team to start the year, but ended up getting kicked off after kickoff, and Verno did not forget how the organization treated him. He absolutely dominated his old team, leading MIBR to a quick 2-0 victory. MIBR losing map 1 13-6 and then second map 13-5. So that is 2 straight matches where they got dominated on. They did not look good in either of those matchups. Again, against 2 very strong teams, but you have to be able to make those games close. If you're going to be a good team in the region, it's fine to lose against the top teams in the region, but at least make it competitive. Other teams were able to do that. Hey, even a team that they beat in Furia were able to make a match against MIBR close. Instead, NRG got absolutely dominated. However, they were able to bounce back against the aforementioned Leviathan. They did end up looking pretty good on that match, especially with an unexpected comp on Icebox, putting Mata on the Reyna. Mata, a player that really needed to get going at that point. Mata was probably NRG's best player throughout the entirety of Stage 1, but was definitely having his struggles. And Mata's stats would get better as the stage went along, while Som's were dropping. He wasn't really looking like the dominant player that we were expecting him to be, but he would do that later on in the stage. He had a very good game against Leviathan. So they win against Leviathan, they go to playoffs, 100 Thieves gets knocked down to the lower bracket where NRG are waiting for them, and instead of making that one close, they lost the first map 13-5, and then they did make map 2 close, 13-11, but they still lost it. So that ended NRG's stage, a very disappointing performance. The organization not looking particularly good for getting rid of Bonkar and replacing Verno with Brock. Not that Brock was doing a terrible job or anything, he was okay, but Verno was doing vastly better on MIBR than basically any player was playing on NRG. At the end of stage 1, they ended up having a 2-3 record. Their maps were 5-7, so they lost 2 more than they won, and the round differential was a disappointing -15, so not really much of anything going right for this team. Looking at their best and worst map throughout the entire year, there's not a ton of good to go off of, but Pearl is a decent bright spot for them. They only have a 2-1 record on it, so it's only been 3 times playing it, but again, it's their best map statistically. They have a 2-1 record on it. Attack win percentage is 56% and defense is 65, so pretty solid number on attack and a elite number on defense, so that is a good sign. However, things get pretty bad for the rest of their map pool, especially for Lotus, a map that they have a 1-4 record on. They've only won on it once, and that was against C9 at the beginning of the stage, but aside from that, it's been a nightmare, so this team should really stop picking it. Their attack win percentage is 42%, defense is 46, so 2 very disappointing numbers on both sides. They're not particularly good at either side of that map, but especially that attack win percentage is concerning. Looking at their overall attack and defense stats for throughout the year so far, on attack in 250 rounds, they have a win percentage of 46%, 115 round wins to 135 lost. In terms of defense, in 208 rounds, they have a 47 win percentage. They've won 98, they've lost 110. So they're not particularly good on either sides of most maps. They are slightly better on defense than they are on attack by only by 1 percentile. And this is a team led by FNS, one of the most story IGLs in the entire game. Obviously, he's had a rough year. He is now retired, so all the trash talk about him is probably going to go away. And, well, not entirely. It'll just be on his chat. But the point of FNS coming back for another year was that you were going to have this IGL that is very experienced in the game, but it just seemed like NRG were behind the meta the entire year. Brock did an okay job on Taeho, but when you look at how Verno is performing on Taeho, it's quite the stark difference, as well as some other great Taeho players in the league, like John QT, Trent, probably the best Taeho in the entire world at this point. And while Brock did a good job, they just couldn't really adapt to the meta. And any of the teams that they beat so far this year haven't exactly been gamebusters. Any really solid team that they face this year, they have lost to. The only 3 teams that they've won against this year are 100 Thieves, that was at kickoff, Furia, and Leviton during stage 1. So again, this is a team that many people expected to be good. They do have a pretty good roster on paper. However, there were some pretty concerning signs with these players, especially statistically. Not really anyone aside from FNS with a particularly bad stat line, but nothing that will really pop out or impress anybody. Looking first at Mata, during stage 1, he had a rating of 1.11. Pretty solid stat right there for him, especially considering his slow start. In terms of kills per round, an impressive 0.82, definitely in the upper half of the region. He had 225 kills, 202 deaths, 61 assists for a KD ratio of 1.11, matching his rating. In terms of characters that he's played throughout the stage, it's all duelist. He is their main duelist player. He played Neon to a pretty effective level as well. Definitely liked his Neon, Jet, Raze, as well as Reyna that one time on Icebox. Mata's definitely a good player, and I feel like Mata just hasn't really been put in the best position on this team. I think what they're probably going to do next year is probably get rid of the veterans in Ethan, maybe Sam goes as well, and then they start to build the roster around Mata and Brock. Bringing in Scuba is definitely going to be an improvement. We'll see how that ends up working out with now they have Ethan back on IGL. We'll talk about Ethan in a bit. But Mata, I think, is definitely a player that this organization should invest their time into. He's a really solid player. He's been around Valorant for a minute. He just hasn't played tier 1 until this year. And I definitely think that in stage 2, if he's set up for success, he will have a pretty strong stage. Very excited to see how Mata develops throughout the year. I think that the ceiling is quite high for him. Moving on to their second best player statistically, we have Sam. Again, a player that had a really strong start to the stage, but started to kind of peter out a bit later on, but still ends with some pretty decent stats. He had a rating of 1.09, 8 kills per round of 0.72. Pretty strong stats, especially for a smokes player. Overall KDA, he had 199 kills, 184 deaths, and 125 assists. A lot of assists there. And ended with a KD ratio of 1.08. Already mentioned, he's a smokes player. He played Omen, Brimstone, Astra, as well as Viper. Sam definitely has a lot to give, and he is staying on the roster after FNS's departure. There's of course rumors going around that the organization wanted to drop FNS early in the year. They wanted to bring in someone else to be IGL, but there were players that apparently threatened to not play for the team if that were to happen. And if that rumor's true, which it does seem to be true, even though some of the members have denied it, but if it's true, it's definitely Sam and Ethan. Sam came back mainly to play with FNS. He's a player that's been basically attached at the hip of FNS basically since they first played together in 2023. And I do understand the loyalty there, and I don't particularly blame those players for not wanting NRG to drop FNS at the time. At the time, I probably would have disagreed with that as well. IGL. I think it would have been good for FNS to at least get another chance, so I do kind of blame the org for that whole mess. And maybe Bonkar wanted a new IGL. Him coming back is very confusing to me. I thought he would never want to go back, but instead that is what is happening. But I think Som should get a chance to flourish without FNS there. He's a very good player. I'm glad he's staying on the roster. I hope he stays throughout the year because Som does have a pretty big fan base as a content creator, as a streamer, much like FNS does. So it would make sense for him to just keep streaming, make the bag from streaming. It's much more profitable than being a player, but he came back for the love of the game, and I really respect that. I get he wanted to play with his buddies, but I think Som is a player that I would love to see at the international level again. Remember in 2023, he surprised me a lot with how strong he was for a player that was kind of known as just like a streamer before that. But he ended up proving doubters wrong and looking really good. So I do hope we see more of him. I hope he stays in the VCT into next year. I'm not really expecting that to happen. Don't hold your breath, NRG fans, but Som is very valuable, so I really hope he does well in Stage 2. Moving on, we have Ethan, a player that is once again going to be their IGL. Now, if you remember how Ethan as IGL went last year, then you're probably like, do we really have to do it again? However, the reality of the situation is that if they're dropping FNS to bring in Scuba, if they're going to bring in another player to be the IGL, then that means they have to drop another player. Which, looking at the roster, I understand why they wouldn't want to do that. You don't want to drop Mata, you don't want to drop Som, you don't want to drop Brock, so Ethan would be the easiest target there. However, it seems like they like him enough and he likes being there enough that they decided to go with that again. I don't think they're expecting to make champs. I think they're just going to try to make a decent run of it in Stage 2 and hopefully have players like Mata, Brock, and Scuba develop some chemistry for next year's roster. So it would make some sense to drop Ethan now in favor of an IGL, but his performance is good enough that I think he's earned a spot. In Stage 1, he did an alright enough job. He had an overall rating of 1.07, 8 kills per round of 0.69. Overall KDA, he had 199 kills, 183 deaths, 103 assists for a KD ratio of 1.01. Being more of their flex player during Stage 1, he played Breach, he played Yoru surprisingly, he played KO as well as Harbor. Him playing Yoru was the most surprising one out of all those. They were running some double duelist comps at times. I guess they don't really trust Mata's Yoru, or they just wanted to, run double duelist because it did work for T1, so a lot of teams tried in Stage 1. Most people are kind of moving away from it now, but it does surprise me a little bit that they didn't try Mata on Yoru. I guess his Yoru isn't exactly fantastic. I haven't seen it personally, don't know his history with that character. Let me know in the comments below if you know. But that definitely is a hindrance to the team if Mata can't perform at a high level on that character, because right now Yoru might be the best duelist in the game. Jet is still solid, but mainly situational depending on the map. Neon has her place as well. Raze, again, depending on the map. Reyna, not really. And then characters like Waylay, Phoenix have their uses here and there. Waylay probably is going to get more and more, better in the meta as we go along here. But I don't think running Ethan on Yoru as a double duelist comp is something that should have happened. I do understand why they gave it a shot, but it just didn't end up working out. Ethan's a solid player. He's good enough to stay in the league, so I'm not saying that I think they should have dropped him with what I was saying earlier. I definitely think he earned his spot on this team, and it makes sense for him to continue his run on NRG for now. We'll see where he ends up next season. I'm not exactly confident that this roster is going to get yet another run back, but we'll see. Either way, I think Ethan is probably going to be on Tier 1 next year. Again, he's good enough, but I think Ethan is better as a complementary piece as opposed to your leader. Think of his time on EG, where he was basically just another player on that roster, more of a complementary support piece, and he did a very good job. Moving on, we have Brock, their new addition to the roster after kicking off Verno, and I'll talk about Brock without comparing him to Verno, because we know Verno is going to be held in a high regard. He's had an amazing run on MIBR, but we're here to talk about what this roster had during Stage 1. And Brock did alright, had some rough moments early in the stage, got better as it went along, and had some better performances. In terms of overall rating, he had a 0.99, 8 kills per round of 0.67. Overall KDA, he had a 183 kills, 186 deaths, 84 assists, and a KD ratio of 0.98. So he's not really a player that's meant to be getting all the kills, but definitely looking at players that play similar roles. Maybe you're looking for a little bit more there. He played Teho, he played Sova, as well as Gecko, so mainly their initiator player. Definitely like that they brought in Brock. I think Brock is a player that's been waiting for his Tier 1 opportunity for quite some time now. I do understand why other players got it first over him, and for Brock, for Stage 1, I'll give him a mulligan. His stats aren't fantastic, but they're also not terrible. It's not something that I look at and say that he's this huge liability on this team, or that they shouldn't have made the switch. I don't think they should have made the switch, but if Brock works better chemistry-wise than Verno did, then it does. But of course, we know that the whole context behind that is kind of, filled with drama. But overall, like what I've seen from Brock so far, I think he has more to give, and I think in Stage 2, he will find a way. Moving on, we have our last player to talk about, the now retired FNS. I love FNS. FNS has been one of my favorite players in the game since 2021. I've been watching the VCT basically since the inception of it. Played the game in 2020 when it came out. I played beta, I followed the VCT, I watched Rank Vic, and I watched at VCT Masters Berlin, the second international tournament. I watched FNS on Envy at the time, they turned into Optic later, go all the way to the grand final. They would of course lose that grand final to Gambit, but then they had a very strong year in 2022. That was of course the Optic team, a team that FNS himself won't shut up about because they were so good. And Optic, they were my team. When they had that original run at Berlin, that is where I fell in love with that roster. I followed them as Optic the next year. I cheered for them when they won Rank Vic. I cheered for them at the other two international tournaments of 2022. I followed the remnants of that roster on NRG that first year in 2023. Then they tried again in 2024. Didn't really work very well. And now we are at 2025, and I have massive respect for FNS, but yeah, he should not be in pro play anymore. I'm sorry, but these stats are really rough to look at. He had a rating of 0.77. I think bottom 5 worst players in terms of rating. Yeah, just checked. He's exactly 5th last. He's actually right above Boostio, which is hilarious. He had a kills per round of 0.49, so very rough stats right there. He has nearly 50 less kills than the next player on his team at 135. He had 196 deaths, which is second best on the team, despite him not being a duelist player, and 78 assists. Decent number there, but an overall KD ratio of 0.69. He was their Sentinel player, he played Vice, he played Killjoy, as well as Cypher. Again, I respect the work that FNS has done throughout his career. I'll probably make a video about his career soon. We have a pretty long break before Toronto, so I'll get to Toronto videos when we're a bit closer to the tournament, but for now I want to do kind of videos like these. But just looking at these stats, watching the team play, and how the results ended up being, yeah, FNS, I'm sorry, but it's time to move on, Unk. He's a great player. Obviously, he has his haters, but overall, he will always be respected in this community. But was it time for him to go? It was. He just could not compete at the highest level anymore, and while he's never been a person that was going to frag out or have the best stats, his calling usually made up for it, but this year, that calling just did not make up for his own personal shortcomings. The team was not playing very well under his leadership, and I just feel like the meta's past him. The game has changed a lot from when he was in his prime, so I wish him all the best as a streamer. He's a good streamer, he'll do fine, and hey, W streamer. So overall, NRG ended up having a pretty disastrous Stage 1, one that I was hoping would not happen. At this point, I'm not really a huge fan of this team. I was rooting for them when, as I already talked about, the Optic roster came into this org, but NRG just doesn't have the same, I don't know, same grab to me as they used to. I think it's mainly just because they failed a bunch. They always seem to have drama surrounding them. In 2024, they had high expectations coming into the season and then completely failed. They make a ton of roster changes. They ended up bringing back Bonkar after kicking him from the roster. I'm still confused as to how he's back. I'm shocked he ended up accepting that, but I guess he just wanted to be a coach for Tier 1, so we'll see if he stays in the next year, but I don't know, your guess is as good as mine. But I thought bringing in Mike's was a bad idea because I don't want to disrespect him, but Mike's had a really bad run in Tier 1 on 100 Thieves, so I wasn't exactly confident this team and how they were performing early in the year was going to exactly improve under him. So they're bringing back that coach. Hopefully they're running the ship. They're making all these roster changes, at least just one so far. Ethan is the IGL again. It didn't go well last time. Maybe it goes a little bit better. I don't think this team is going to make the playoffs. I don't even know if that's necessarily their goal. I think what they mainly want to do is just develop Mata, Brock, and Scuba. You have these players that came up from Tier 2. You're showing them a little bit of Tier 1 before the next season. And hey, maybe they do end up messing around and make playoffs. It is possible, but they're going to have a pretty tough time, especially in the group. Anyways, that is all I want to talk about today. Let me know in the comment section down below. What did you think of NRG during Stage 1? Do you think they're going to recover in Stage 2? Do you think the roster change that they're doing is worth it? Let me know all that and more in the comment section down below. Please click like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you guys next one. Bye.